mean, I've talked to many activists that live in urban areas that are just like, we want to get out of here. We want to go live, and grow organic fruits and vegetables and take care of ourselves and learn skills and trades and, build our own homes and things like that. With the kind of feeling of guilt that goes along with it, that are we abandoning things too soon? I mean, are we really turning our back on the struggle when we really have the obligation to be at the front lines and still trying to fight? For a long time now, the government and corporations and the politicians that represent them have been trying to fight back against animal rights and environmental activists and all social justice movements. But particularly post-September 11th, they really turned to using terrorism rhetoric and terrorism legislation in court cases and this kind of eco-terrorist and domestic terrorist and all types of terrorist scaremongering to really instill fear and to attack activists that way. So we've seen an escalation of those tactics, especially in the last few years, but it's been going on long before September 11th as well. A lot of people are using this term green scare to define what's going on right now, and it's a term not meant to imply that what's going on is the same as what happened during the Red Scare of the 40s and 50s and also the 20s. It's not to imply that it's in any way worse or better. It's just to make a historical reference that most people get, that what we did as a country, as a nation, to people in that era of U.S. history is inexcusable. I mean, it's a black mark on the history of this country, and we shouldn't be going that way again. But the tactics we're seeing right now that the government is using, from the court cases and legislation and the scaremongering and guilt by association, they're all eerily parallel to all the same models that were put in place during the Red Scare. Really, the most significant impact of this terrorism rhetoric isn't on people that are using illegal tactics, because in many ways those people already know what they're doing is illegal. There aren't any new crimes being created. But what the government is doing is trying to create new penalties for those crimes and enhance them using these terrorism enhancements, and to slap on this terrorism label to make their time in the prison system even worse than it would have been, to have punitive measures to instill fear in the general public. So none of this is meant to be a deterrent, because what we've seen time and again, and the FBI and Department of Justice recognize, is when people are that passionate about an issue beyond themselves. This isn't about greed, this isn't a mafia crime or a drug dealer. It's people who are passionate about the environment and about protecting other life. And when you have individuals like that going to great lengths, no prison sentence is going to deter that. What this is really meant to do, and the biggest impact of all this green scare, is to go after people using their First Amendment rights, to go after the broader movement, to go after people that are ideologically supportive of those who use illegal tactics. I mean, it's meant to instill this fear, have this chilling effect on everyday people and make them think twice about whether they want to be an outspoken so-called radical or so-called eco-terrorist supporter or radical environmentalist or animal rights activist. Well, I think one clear theme that we're seeing with all of this going on right now is that the people that are being targeted, it's not necessarily because they're simply hurting corporate profits or that they're simply doing something that's illegal. I think there's really a deeper attack going on right now, and it's really a culture war, and it's a war of values. It's a war on entire belief systems that, and I think the environmental and animal rights movements in many ways cut to the heart of that more than some other social justice movements right now. They really get to core issues of what it means to be a human being. How are we interacting with the natural world? How are we interacting with each other? And at the same time, bringing in critiques of capitalism and empire and many other issues. And that's really at its heart what the MOVE organization was about as well. And I think that's really why they were perceived by the government as such a threat, because they weren't single issue, and they weren't necessarily just about protesting or just about so-called lifestyle politics. They really did it all. I mean, they were building ideological links between all of these issues and showing how there are patterns of oppression and how things are connected. And at the same time, they're building links between your personal life and your political life. So not only living the way that we want to see the world become, but also going out there and demanding that it become that way. And so the combination of those two things are extremely dangerous to people in power and to prevalent worldviews that people don't want to change. And I think those parallels are exactly the same in the animal rights and environmental movements. Well, my experience reporting on these issues and seeing aspects of the radical environmental movement and the mainstream environmental movement and the animal protection movement is that it's heavily about community and creating and living your life with other people that you share similar values with, not only personally but also extending that politically as well. So I think a good example is like in the Northwest with the Cascadia Forest Defenders and people that are actually going out, putting their bodies on the line. In doing so, in attempting to block logging operations or destruction of the natural world, they're not only living out their beliefs and attempting to physically stop something they see as an injustice, but the only way that's possible, the only way those tactics can be carried out, is if you have a strong community of people supporting you. The same goes for illegal tactics, like the Animal Liberation Front and Earth Liberation Front, and people that have been arrested. Well, those individuals have been arrested and they're facing prison sentences, or they're in prison now, but they also heavily depend on a community of people that are going to take care of their dogs and cats, that are going to water their plants, that are going to take care of their bills and raise money and line up attorneys. It's not possible without a strong community of people supporting them. And we've seen the negative consequences when they don't have that community of people. That people sometimes, you cave into that fear and you think it's all over, your life is over, no one's going to remember you, everyone's forgotten about you. That's what the FBI tells people. So unless you have a strong community, you're going to be susceptible to that. And the best way to combat that fear is to have a community of people that you can trust and you support, and that you know if you're worried about something or if you're feeling really depressed when you're thinking about the state of US and global politics, you have people you can talk to, that you have people that support you, that if you get arrested on a bogus charge at a protest or not at a protest, they have people that are going to know that you're missing and that you need legal support, and that they can raise benefits and flyers and all the things that need to be done to make sure that you're taken care of. So in that sense, I think it's just so important to mix that personal with the political, because they're not separable. I mean, you really have to have both in order to be an effective social justice movement, and especially an effective social justice movement that's fighting back against the most powerful empire in the history of the world. Well, unfortunately, what we've seen in the last few years is that none of these issues are going away. Even with the Green Scare, which seems like a relatively isolated chunk of the broader political climate right now, right? It's just environmental and animal rights activists. Within that community, things are expanding and the crackdown is increasing. This new law, the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, has just been applied for the first time to 2 cases. Individuals who are accused of releasing mink from fur farms, and individuals in California who aren't accused of anything except protesting, leafleting, and wearing bandanas at lawful protests. This is the extent to which the government is willing to go to criminalize dissent. And I think it would be a mistake to think that this is going to turn around with the Obama administration, which these arrests have happened under the Obama administration and Obama Justice Department. And it's also a mistake to think that if we just kind of hunker down, we can wait for it to pass over. Once they round up people that are actually accused of illegal actions, the crackdown's going to stop. And what we're seeing is it's not stopping with the people that have actually done illegal things. These industry groups have labeled the Humane Society as a terrorist organization. They've labeled mainstream organizations like the Sierra Club as eco-terrorists. I mean, they really have no limits to the extent they're willing to go. And when you combine that with the broader political climate of domestic spying and warrantless wiretaps, both of which the Obama administration has defended, extraordinary renditions, sending people abroad to be tortured, of the closure of Guantanamo and the transfer of inmates to similar facilities in the United States, the creation of, it's still unclear what this all means, but these FEMA detention camps. It's certainly quite a bleak picture. At the same time, though, despite all of this going on, I'm not a pessimist about any of this, because what we've seen time and again throughout history, throughout U.S. history and world history, is that as these escalations increase, it's a reflection on movements gaining power and being more successful. None of this crackdown would be taking place unless animal rights and environmental activists and broader social justice movements were truly perceived as a threat. The resources would not be wasted on people that are truly seen as not being any threat to any worldview or any people in power. And I think people should take stock in that. And I think we should also take stock in the fact that we're on the right side of history, that people that have experienced this throughout US history and world history, this government repression and the grand juries and the lawsuits and the prison time and the arrests and the legislation, we now revere them in history books and in national holidays and in monuments as heroes. And not to say that we should be that egotistical to think that we're so heroic, but also just to take it with a grain of salt and remember that we may be on the brunt end of this attack now, but 30 years from now, is that going to be the case?